Worldmax is probably the most well-known company that makes officially licensed Plants vs. Zombies plushes. Over the years they have made plenty of sets, but today we're going to be looking at their first attempt at making Plants vs. Zombies plushes for their first set. So with that said, welcome to a look at the Plants vs. Zombies Worldmax Set 1 plush set. Let's start with the first plush in this set, which is the Pea Shooter. Now this probably is the most accurate Pea Shooter plush that was ever made by any company. The face of the Pea Shooter is really accurate and is a limer green color than the base of the Pea Shooter, which is also accurate. This Pea Shooter plush also has a pea in its mouth, which is a really nice addition. I'm glad Worldmax made it. It could also come out of his mouth and go back in because it has a string attached to the back of the mouth. The base of this Pea Shooter plush is actually really accurate compared to the Lynxen one, because the Lynxen one only used 3 while this one has 4, which is much more accurate to the game. There is also a big size version of this plush, which is the exact same as the normal size except just everything's bigger on the plush. There's also a keychain of this plush, and the only thing they really changed about the keychain is the size and that it doesn't have a pea in its mouth anymore. There is also a rare variant of this Pea Shooter plush that has a suction cup on its head, which is actually extremely rare for any Worldmax plush, so this is probably the rarest variant out of all of these. If you want any of the variants of the Pea Shooter, I recommend looking on eBay, Macari, or Zanu, and the big size is probably the most common, and the keychain is probably the second most common, the normal size is probably the third most common, the suction cup variant is the rarest of all of these. Now let's move on to the next plush in the set, which is the Sunflower. Now the face on this Sunflower plush is actually pretty accurate. Once again, just like the Pea Shooter, I don't think any other company did a better job of making the face on the Sunflower the most accurate than Worldmax. And once again, just like the Pea Shooter, they made an accurate leaf base unlike Lynxen Sunflower, which is a lot better. Overall, I think Worldmax did a great job making this Sunflower. Once again, it comes in a keychain and big size variant. The big size is probably the most common, the keychain is probably the second most common, and the rarest variant is the normal size. Now let's move on to the next plush in the set, which is the Walnut. Now there's actually something really interesting about this Walnut plush. It only comes in one size, which is a keychain size. It's really weird that Worldmax only chose to make a keychain size for the Walnut plush. But even though this plush is really small, the face is still really good on this plush. Worldmax did a good job doing the embroidery on the face, and overall it still looks pretty good even though it's a little small. But yeah, this plush is extremely rare though, and barely anyone has. I recommend looking on eBay or Zanu for this plush because that's basically the only place you'll be able to find it. Now let's move on to the next plush in the set, which is the Sunshroom. Now, just like the Walnut, this plush only comes in one size, but instead of a keychain size, it comes in a big size. And overall, this plush is actually pretty good. The face of this plush is really accurate and a lot more accurate than the Lynxen one, which is for some reason smiling. And it has its mouth open and it has weird eyes. I don't know why Lynxen did that. But Worldmax actually made an accurate version of the Sunflower face, and the cap on this one's pretty good too. One bad thing about this plush is that sometimes the cap could overall squish the plush over time and make it harder to stand up because you can make the plush's weight uneven on some sides, so it might fall over a lot. But besides that, I think the Sunshroom's a pretty good plush. Once again, I look at eBay or Macari or Zanu for this plush. Now let's go on to the next plush in the set, which is the Fumes Room. Now the face on this plush is actually really good, and I guess the angry look of the Fumes Room in the game perfect on this plush. The cap on this plush also looks really good because on the Lynxen one they're just circles, but on this one they're actually different shapes and sizes and everything like that, and it just looks really good. And yeah, overall this plush is just a lot more detailed than any other Fumes Room version out there. If you want this plush, look on eBay, Macari, or Zanu. Now let's move on to the next plush set, which is the Squash. Now the variations of the Squash plush are actually a little different from another, so we're going to start with the big size variant. Now the big size variant of the Squash is overall pretty good, and I'm glad that Worldmax decided to put more detail onto it than Lynxen did. I really like that Worldmax added little lumps on the Squash because it makes it just look more accurate and just makes it look more detailed overall, and it looks better. The angry look on the Squash's face is also nicely embroidered on, and its eyes are slightly covered a bit by the thing above its eyes. This is by far the most common variant of the Squash plush, and you could easily find it on eBay or Macari. Now the normal size version is a bit different than the big size version. The main difference is that it's smaller, and also instead of having a flap over its eyes, it just has green embroidery above them and you can see the eyes fully now. Overall, I think this design of the normal size squash is a lot better than the big size design. I just like having the plush not have a flap over its eyes more than the big size one does. And I'm glad that Linkson changed it for the smaller sizes of the squash. Overall, this is probably the second rarest variant of the squash plush, but it's kinda hard to tell because the keychain is also really rare. The keychain on this plush is basically the exact same as the normal size, but just smaller. But by far the rarest variant in this whole set is the plush with the suction cup on it. So yeah, once again, just like the Pea Shooter, some of these squash plushes could come with suction cups, but that's extremely rare, and I've barely seen any photos of plushes that have suction cups on them. For all of these variants, I recommend looking on eBay, Mercari, or Zanyu, but good luck finding the suction cup versions because they're basically impossible to find. Now let's move on to the next plush in the set, which is the Jalapeno. Now, this is probably the best jalapeno plush to ever be made by any company. I just really like it for some reason. It just looks really detailed over all the other jalapeno plushes, but one weird thing about this plush that only came in one size, the big size. I'm glad that Worldmax made this plush have its eyes really wide open because it just makes the plush look better, and also they made them in 3D, and also on the right eye is getting covered a little bit, which is very accurate. The mouth on this plush also just looks more accurate to the game, and it just looks better overall and gives the plush more detail. And overall, the shape of this plush is just a lot better than the Linkson one, as also is not on a lily pad like the Linkson one. The only downside to this though is that the plush can't stand well unless it's against something else, because it could just fall over really easily, so you either have to lay it by its side or have it stand up by something else. But besides the issue of it standing up, this plush is really good. I recommend looking on eBay or Mercari for this plush because you could find them there for pretty cheap. Now let's move on to the next plush in the set, which is the Gatling P. Now this plush is probably one of my favorites in this whole set. It just looks really good and is really nicely detailed and has all the correct details for a Gatling P. So yeah, starting with the barrels in its mouth, instead of having a P like the Pea Shooter, it has barrels in its mouth, but one bad thing about this was that it could get separated really easily and go all over the place. It just kind of looks weird sometimes. This plush has little paint lines under his eyes to make it look like more accurate to the game. Also, the eyes have the eyes of the repeater, just like the Gatling P in the game. This plush also has a helmet on it, which is really nice, but one bad thing about this helmet is that there's been lots of Gatling Ps that have had the helmet fall off over the years, so I'd be careful with that. It just seems like Worldmax didn't really stitch them on that well because most have fallen off. And the rest of the plush is basically the exact same as the Pea Shooter with the base and the stem. This plush you could probably find on eBay and Mercari for relatively cheap. Now let's move on to the next plush in the set, which is the Cattail. Now, this is probably the most detailed Cattail plush to ever be made by any company, and in my opinion is by far the best Cattail ever made. The face on this plush is really nice and it has all the correct details, and the face just looks more accurate to the game than any other Cattail plush. The leaves on this plush also just look more accurate, and the base just looks really nice on this plush. The tail on this plush is also really good, and the pointy part of it is really nice and has all the correct colors and details to it. And there's also a big size variant of this plush, but I can only find one photo of the big size variant. It's probably one of the rarest Worldmax plushes to be made. There is also a variant to the Cattail plush that has a suction cup just like the squash and the Pea Shooter. The most common variant is probably the normal size variant, and the second most common is probably the suction cup variant, and the third most common is probably the big size, because the big size only has like one photo to my knowledge. But yeah, all variants of this plush are extremely rare, so good luck finding them, and I would recommend looking on eBay or Zanyu for this plush. Now let's move on to the final plant plush in this set, which is the Cob Cannon. Now, one thing interesting about this plush is that it's not actually a plush, it's a tissue box holder. But yeah, even though it's a tissue box holder, it's kind of like a plush because, well, it is made out of plush material and it is stuffed as a plush, so I'm just going to kind of call it a plush here. This is probably my favorite plush in this whole set because it's just super well detailed and just looks really nice. The actual cob of this plush is really nice. It is really nicely detailed with embroidery to see all like the corn and stuff and to see all like the details on it. The head's also made out of a nice lime green color, and the eyes just look really accurate to the game. And overall, the wheels on this plush also just look really accurate, and overall, this plush just looks amazing. I think Worldmax definitely put the most detail into this plush because it just looks the nicest overall. The one bad thing about this plush though is that if it doesn't have a tissue box in it, the plush just kind of looks deflated looking because, well, the tissue box is meant to like hold it up and just to make it look better, because without a tissue box in it, the plush just kind of looks deflated. And there's nothing in the middle without a tissue box in it, so that's why it just kind of looks weird without it in it. But overall, this plush is just really good, and it's extremely rare though. I recommend it on eBay or Zanu for this plush, but it is extremely rare and barely shows up. Now let's move on to the final plush in this set, which is the zombie. Now this is actually the first variant of the zombie plush Worldmax ever made without plastic eyes, instead of, the normal variant and the most common variant that does have plastic eyes, but this one has felt eyes. And there's two different variants of the first design of the zombie, with the only changes being is that one has a red mouth and the other has a black mouth. And yeah, these plushes only come in one variant, being the big size variant in both of them. And they are the exact same as any other zombie variant, including the big size plastic eye variant. So yeah, there's not much to really say about this plush, but overall they are really nice looking, but they are probably the most rare plush in the whole set, because there are only like 2 photos of each of these plushes and you could barely find them anywhere. And yeah, to my knowledge, no one owns these plushes, so yeah, good luck finding them if you want one of them. But yeah, which plush in this set is your favorite? Mine's probably the Cobb Cannon, but comment down below what your favorite plush in this set is. And yeah, make sure to like and subscribe and have a great day.